So welcome everyone. So this is obviously a very special one. Like I said, we'll do buyout updates, then committee updates. Then we have some like kind of fun stuff to preview. And then we'll open up the floor for some Q&A. And then afterwards we'll roll into the usual happy hour. Ace?
Thanks, by the way, One and Crypto Snatcher and anyone else who put together these visuals for us. Most of you already know this, but late on the evening of the 22nd, we got the contract signed, and then Chunk and I spent all night working on getting a lot of the key assets transferred. That's still in process. There's still a lot of stuff that needs to come over, but a lot of, most of the major stuff is done with a little bit left. And I guess not to get ahead of myself, because there are going to be some things that we're going to cover later on in this town hall. But now we're very close to the what's next stage. So I guess I'll pass it back to Juan.
Cool. Well, thank you. That's obviously like extremely exciting. It's something that we've been kind of like grinding on for, it's been about a month, right? It's been about a month.
Yeah, if I sound tired, it's because this took like 2 months. But beneath my tired exterior, I'm very happy and very optimistic.
A lot of people have been asking about marketing push, so we'll definitely have some tweets out to announce this. I think a few people have already noticed that we do have control of the GGSG Twitter, and so we'll definitely be using that.
Definitely, it's a big resource.
Snatcher?
Okay, cool. Yeah, I can give an update on the legal and governance committee. So over the last week or so, we've been discussing more about the Gecko DAO Council, and some of the details are in here, kind of capture and summarize our discussions so far, and a couple of things yet to be determined. But essentially, starting off with the role of the council, essentially is to make those have like a body that can be sort of in between the DAO and the committee leads, so that we can really prioritize for agility on things that don't necessarily need to go to a DAO vote initially. Some of those things may change over time, but for now, I think what we want to strike is a good balance and a good compromise for moving the project forward in a expeditious way, and really striking a good balance with the committee leads, and as well as having a representation from the committees in this council. So we have about 6 committees, and the number we're kind of coming to is around 5 for voting members. And the key to exercise here is essentially that committee leads or a committee liaison essentially would be part of this council that would be kind of active, day to day here as we get started. So if I were to kind of put back on what this council really means, if I look at like the Spotify agile development concept, where we have crews and squads, our organizations today, we have committees, which are kind of like crews, and each committee has, may have different projects or different teams, like sub teams, working on different things within that committee, and those would be like squads. And so the council is really a connecting fabric, and so they're going to be the people that are going to be acting, on the trenches initially. And so that's kind of where we landed so far. Does not block us from having non-voting advisors as part of this council, but we do want to have a core group of folks, around 5, to kind of not be bogged down around decision making when it comes to this initial couple of phases. And so the other thing to note is the term, 2 to 3 months initially, to kind of really understand. Initially there's going to be a lot of engagement up front, And so we will need to sort of see, are the people here, is this time going to work for most people, right? So like over time, this may change, but initially we're thinking around 2 to 3 months as the initial term. And so we'll have some more details next week around elections, how nominations can work and how all that's going to work. What do we need to do to kind of be nominated and those kinds of things. So stay tuned for more details. We'll probably announce in the next town hall and set some things in motion to kind of establish a council for the project. And I guess the last thing to note also is I mentioned before around the, evaluating the size and the term periodically. If we do add more committees over time, does that change the composition of the council, or do we have to have different requirements around serving multiple committees? So those things will have to be studied, and it's almost iteration by trial and error here. But we do want to stay concise initially and change that potentially as we evolve. And then the last thing to note is the ability to initiate some early removal in case the folks that are elected, there's something that kind of prevents the agility to happen, and other things more nefarious in nature, which I hope it doesn't happen. But we do need to have that also thought through. So yeah, I think that's the highlights of where we have discussed in the last week or so. If there's any questions, feel free to ask any one of us in the chat or in the channel as well. Juan, back to you. I don't know if there's any questions here, but
Yeah, if you guys have questions, just note them down maybe, and we'll get to them at the end. Cool. Thanks, Nasher, for the update. Look forward to the council info and elections coming soon. For strategy, I don't know if C or Sterling wants to go first.
Yeah, it's C. Before I give the updates for the strategy team, I do want to say we definitely appreciate your time. We are grateful that you're spending a portion of your weekend with us. Lots of exciting developments in the past week. Kudos to Pace, Trap, and team. But more importantly, we look forward to what's to come. Now, just to level set, there are finer details of the roadmap that I can't discuss fully, since discussions are occurring at the moment. But what I can state is 100% is that the team is highly motivated and collaborative. You'll see, some of the team members like Sterling, Safety, Crypto Snatcher, Shug Season, and Lando, and I can keep going. Now, in terms of updates in the past week, we welcome Rabbit as part of the strategy team. We look forward to working with him. Additionally, the strategy team met and developed a roadmap further, discussing key points that cross-functional teams can or may work on. At this point, we definitely want to balance our time on short-term and long-term deliverables that tie into our vision of becoming the primary home base of Web3 explorers. Now, key areas we focused on this week were community building activities such as providing more information to holders on mints, NFT alpha, FAQs regarding the Geckoverse, metaverse experiences, real-life meetups and events. Now, we definitely see some of the chats that's occurring, and there's been some questions from members regarding Geckoverse assets such as accordions, crystals, and geckos. Let me tell you that those discussions are happening. For instance, Sterling created a lore influenced thought piece on possible utility for these assets. Now, at this point, that's as far as I can go, since discussions are and will continue. But I will say that we are careful and thoughtful about how all of these assets tie into the lore and where we think we'll be in the long term. Now, for questions, we can get them later. I'll pass it on to Sterling.
I put together a potential option for additional roadmaps, specifically keying on how we underline principles of moving forward. I think learning from some of the mistakes of the past, we increased our supply significantly of NFTs in our eco space right out of the gates. And I think that had a negative consequence on our price. I think that we all felt that. So moving forward with the fifth faction journey, and how do we do that in a manner that's not inflationary? How do we accomplish that? We have a ton of fun doing it, and we build in mechanics of some kind that the marketplace has already proven out that people are willing to invest in an exciting way and building up upon our tech base. I think if we introduce stakings or tokens or burning or these things that are being discussed, we're trying to be thoughtful about whether or not we're creating them in-house versus exploring options to partner with other projects that have those kind of tools, and working with them to put together a good experience for us in the long run. Because what we're trying to do, what we were initially built as is a social adventure club, and we want to go on those adventures in ways that we provide a really good experience without shooting ourselves in the foot with creating too many NFTs and whatnot. So there's a line being discussed on what needs to happen in order to get the fit faction or to do whatever other adventures that we're going to be going on in the future. And I don't think anything's been decided about, but there's a lot of really great ideas. And I think for the most part, the principles underlying most of everybody's ideas is fairly universal. Trying to either be deflationary or at very least not inflate our current supply of NFTs, as well as introducing some things that could be really fun and that have proven to be successful in other projects. And you guys can all probably imagine what those are, but as far as presenting this in any official capacity right now, nothing's been decided, but a lot of the things that have been already discussed in general chats ever since we kind of went down this road post spaceship debacle, all those things have kind of coalesced into a really good conversation that I think is going to end up producing something really, really sweet, and I'm excited about it. So I don't know what you'd like me to go into any more, one other than just kind of the general where we're at with that. But there's been Trance and myself both have kind of written up some things that have a lot of similarities in general principles of what we'd like to see moving forward. And so we have a discussion to do that. I've reached out to a couple other projects that have done some of the similar things that we've been talking about, and trying to figure out exactly how they do what they do, exactly what they might be able to provide us in resources if we were to use some of their tools, and then how difficult would it be to just create our own. And once we have all that data, really make the decision and go from there.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks for that. I really want to emphasize the space garage point, because I think a lot of us here, we really gravitated towards that concept that that to his credit, Draper kind of evangelized early on, which was this is a space garage for friends to hang out, and it's just a cool, fun place to be. And I think everything that Sterling and Safety have put a lot of thought into, more or less, kind of enhances dynamic. It's it's a fun, cool place to hang out with some cool stuff going on. So that's all pretty exciting. Okay, so fun stuff coming up. Well, let me take a screenshot of this first and throw it into general. Okay, to kind of celebrate our independence, for lack of a better word, Pace actually had this idea to do a Gecko Week, which would consist of at least one fun event or hype announcement for 7 days. And so some of these we already have, well, all of them we have lined up, but some of them we are going to be surprises, and some of them we can kind of like talk about ahead of time because they have to be scheduled. So some examples that I have on here are spaces and voice chats with other projects. So Ancestors, which you guys have kind of seen here and there. Secret Space Society, which Shove Season kind of like connected us with. Fun fact about Secret Space Society is that one of their devs actually created the Mint software that Monkey Labs uses. So there's some really interesting kind of dev resources there. Also, I've been kind of talking about the workshops for a while now. The idea is essentially to have recurring workshops with experts or like kind of experts that can basically like teach people and be kind of a forum to connect with people and learn something new, essentially. That's kind of interesting. And so the first one will be on Tuesday. That will be with Gibby, who is also a Gecko holder. And she's actually an IP attorney. And so she's going to talk about IP law and NFTs, which I think everyone here probably has like an idea of how that works, but like nobody, there's a lot of murkiness to it. So it's kind of interesting, actually. And then the last thing that I will say is we have been in contact with Alpha Art, which is kind of exciting for me personally. Like anybody who has been here since Mint or for a few months knows that there was that kind of, for lack of a better word, like drama early on with Alpha Art and the legacy dev team. And so we really want to be all about building bridges instead of burning them, and in this case, rebuilding that bridge, and kind of essentially cooperating and moving the whole space forward. Like Solana isn't that big of an ecosystem, and there's just no room to have like animosity or anything. So I've actually been in contact with Alpha Art, and they're totally down, and they're totally supportive of what we're trying to do. And so we're gonna have a joint Twitter Spaces with them sometime in the near future.
Yeah, completely agree with all the stuff that one said. Part of my interest and inspiration for doing Gecko Week and kicking things off that way is many of us here are old enough to remember when we got our our hopes up for a week when we were going to get like a bullish date or announcement every day for a week. And I don't know if people remember how that worked out, but it left me feeling very disappointed. And we're no longer beholden to other people for that type of stuff to happen. So I'm really excited about some of the things that I know are coming up, and
yeah. So just
so
to
many
add
people in this community
one more
have worked
surprise to that,
together,
I know this just came
a
up
really fun
maybe
week.
half an hour ago. I'm not going to be mentioning any names as of right now. It's still in the works, but there's somebody that I'm working on lining up that would love to rock out an honorary Gecko, and it's somebody big, like big. I know I sent it to a couple of you in the chat. Check it, but nothing to announce as of right now, but certainly the ability that it can happen or will happen. So I just wanted to add to those surprises. Of course, anything from my Geckos.
Love to hear it, my man. Thank you for doing that. So we may be doubling up some of these days, but we're not going to leave people hanging. There's interesting stuff, and even after Gecko Week is over, the
At this point,
continues.
I'd like to open the
A
floor
lot
for
of
any
great stuff
questions
that
or comments
can't
on
necessarily
anything that
happen in
we
the first week,
went over.
but we're really excited about making it happen.
When
some
does
way.
one crystal equal one Lambo?
Ace, you want to take that one?
Nancy is into the chat. We burn every other crystal, maybe.
Burn every crystal. And so I guess the real question is, when does one Concordian equal one Tesla?
30 minutes, maybe?
30
Yeah,
minutes.
30 minutes is exactly the response for that, for sure. 30
God.
minutes and don't hold your breath, but
I
don't
think
know.
I still think it's unbelievable how, like, you guys still want to say they're valueless. I mean, I think they're valuable. I think there's other people that think they're valuable. I know, like the whole brainwashing session that the last team put me through, I had to spend some time therapy, intensity. After therapy was over, they told me Concordians are valuable. I don't know. I mean, it's just what the therapist told me. Absolutely.
And,
Please hold.
and can you modify that Dumb and Dumber meme and put conks in it?
Quick little comment, like I'm looking up and down this roster of people on this voice chat, and I love seeing like Hans and some of the Kiwis in here. Kind of warms my heart a little bit.
Is Hans in here? Hey, Hans, can you give us a breakdown on the crystals?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, is his therapy not over yet?
It's a sensitive subject for him, I think. Yeah. Let's circle back to the conks during happy hour, maybe. Does anybody else have any questions or comments about the town hall? Anything regarding the
From
contract,
the marketing
Gecko
side, I
Week,
wanted to ask
strategy,
everyone,
council?
whenever you guys get a chance, to try to print a picture of your gecko and just stay tuned. But just if you have a chance to do that, just print a picture of your gecko and have it on standby. Yeah. Yeah. And I'll be like tweeting about it soon or what.
Oh yeah, I like that idea that you had. So
Hey, I
highly
had a
recommend
quick
that.
question.
Go print a
Can you
picture of
guys
your
hear me?
gecko.
Yeah.
This is Posky. I just wanted to know, in terms of the DAO, is there going to be any sort of ability for
loud and
us to
clear.
participate on decision making through like voting mechanics? And if so, is that going to be done through holding geckos, or is there going to be some other way to like distribute the votes?
Yeah, good question. So there will be a few types of kind of voting touch points for people. It
What?
will be through geckos. So one
I
FT
didn't
equals
know.
one vote.
Sorry.
Concordians and crystals are
Back to the
non-voting
therapist on
as
that
of
one.
now. The most important. Uh, yeah. So the most important vote or election will be for the council. So once we kind of sort out what that process looks like specifically, everyone will be able to vote on the 5 people that they think will best represent them on a council. And the council and the committees will have a lot of day-to-day power, really. Periodically, things can go to a DAO-wide vote and kind of go through that kind of more thorough but slower process. So some examples of things that could be is major roadmap changes, changes to like structure or bylaws, or voting
Cool.
to
Appreciate the answer.
kind of swap out council members before the term ends. Like kind of big things like that. Yeah, no problem. I think Snatcher touched on it earlier. If we really wanted to make it so that committees and councils can execute really quickly, one thing that we've talked about before is kind of aiming towards this kind of DAO startup hybrid. Because as we look at other DAOs in the space, things generally move pretty slow, and generally like DAOs aren't completely in charge of a project. It's usually like there's a dev team and then there's a DAO who like does stuff that isn't necessarily like very time sensitive. But we definitely want to compete with all the projects that have dedicated like full-time dev teams. And so we are kind of interested in looking into hiring people full-time for some spots. But I think our greatest strength is definitely like our strength in numbers, essentially. Like we're a 10K collection, which isn't that common nowadays. But because of that, we have potentially like a few thousand awesome Gecko ambassadors. And like we have all these ideas.
If I can
and
add
like
just
we have
one
a lot of
more
hands and a
thought
lot of
there for
talent and a lot of
Pulaski.
skills.
So I think we're trying
So
to
for us, it's just a matter of
aim to
organizing in a
land
way
in a
where we
place
can
where
leverage that
there
as where we
are
can.
going to be like sentiment votes, stuff like that, like informal voting that we can kind of gauge community feedback on certain stuff. So it doesn't come out of left field and all of a sudden it's like, boom, I have to decide on this one thing and this other thing. I don't like them both. So, getting the ability to, give your voice early in the process is, I think, key, but in a way that it doesn't slow down the overall process. So we're trying to strike a balance there. So that's the only other thing I would add. Like if there are things necessarily that resonate to you or jump to you or different things you like to kind of propose, to kind of get engaged in one of the committees and work with the committee lead initially to at least bubble things up and question on things like, hey, have we gotten a sentiment on this, or can we run a poll on that? I think those are good ways to kind of engage and get feedback early on, so that we don't end up in a cycle where when things come out on the other end, they're not everybody likes, right? So like we want to minimize that that risk. So does that make sense?
Yeah, sure does.
Hopefully you're not dragging this on too much, but one other thing to mention is that we did a bunch of research. So a few of us had a meeting with representatives from the Gecko DAO board, and then I had a talk with squads who, like DAOs are basically their clients, so they kind of are kind of in tune with trends and what's going on. And then a few other people have been in talks with like the heads of some of the really um, like popular and like efficient projects around the ecosystem. So we really try to like learn about what's working and what hasn't worked, and like what could work for us, and then like we're essentially trying to settle on a starting point. But that doesn't mean that in a year we won't look slightly different. Because along the way we
Hey
might
everybody,
learn some things
this is
and
Tom.
adjust.
Hope everyone's doing well. Thank you guys for putting this on. Super cool. Quick question I had
Good question,
was, are we still using the same designs of the original merch that was kind of teased, or are we developing new merch? Any updates on that?
Merch has only been kind of talked about a little bit. We do have some people that either run shops or are vendors for merch, or have close connections to people who can produce merch. As far as the design, personally, I wasn't a huge fan of the original design. So what we've kind of talked about was kind of coming up with like 2 or 3 concepts and then having people vote on
Okay,
the
cool.
design.
Yeah, I agree.
Before
I
getting
wasn't
it
a huge
produced.
fan of the original designs.
So
Feel like they
that's
could
probably something
definitely
that you'll
get
see
a more hype
something on in the next week or
front
2.
and back, maybe like a little bit cleaner. But yeah, excited to hear more about that. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. One other little thing, like right before this whole like transition started, I actually commissioned a designer to create some shirt designs, and I was like in talks with a local vendor to produce them, and that obviously got put on hold. So that might be one of the designs that people can vote on, and I'll throw some screenshots of that after.
Yeah, thanks for putting
after
this on,
talk
guys.
to see what people
Have a good
think of
weekend,
it.
everyone. Later.
Cool. Thanks, Tom.
I think he came to life on that last one.
Has everyone had a chance to see some of Gossip's like pieces that he's been
Gossip's
doing
just
lately?
finished working full time last week, so I think he's got more time. So we need to like plug him as hard as possible. He's also like seemingly fucking inspired at the moment, so you know,
That's
straight while the iron's hot, man.
That's exactly what it feels like. Inspired. Like it feels like all of a sudden, like the goblin that did the collection that we all know and love, like the guy that was gonna do the next faction, like came out, and that last one that he did was special. Oh, what's up, guys? Oh, I got to mute. Sorry.
Yeah, actually going off of that, with Gossip Goblin, shout out to Gossip Goblin. It's been looking sick, those new designs and everything. Keep it up. Have we thought about, obviously it's all potential, but have we thought about how we can implement that without devaluing or diluting, the collection or the OG collection, or how that would work with like rarity if we were to be able to convert our OGs into those or back and forth or whatever? I just had a concern about that, to be honest, too.
Yeah, that's actually like one of the main things that actually led to all of this. This whole transition is like we were all worried about inflation and like supply and kind of pushing back on that. I know it's been something that
Yeah, I mean,
JP and Sterling and C
from both
and
what we've kind of
the
written
strategy
out and just
folks
presented in
have
our
been putting a lot
internal
of thought
group
into.
there, that is
I don't know
of
if C
utmost
or
concern.
Sterling or Safety Winner
Like
wanna.
the principles that me personally I'd like to see us move forward with is not expanding our collection and either having some form of transition or like not necessarily mutation, but a change coming upon one of the geckos in order to be able to become empowered with the power of the lost faction or something like that. So we don't press it beyond much beyond like a 10,000 mark. I would like to burn some stuff personally to just get our collection size down a bit, and to focus more solely on the collection itself and introduce the ability to modify your gecko by a number of different things. But that's all being discussed right now, and totally open to hearing ideas that we can talk about. But just to address your concern, it is absolutely number one priority to not shoot ourselves in the foot while we try to bring new content by just increasing the supply so much, or not proactively putting in mechanisms that can benefit our main, each gecko holder's main holdings. So I don't know, that was kind of I went full circle there, but I hope that answers your question.
Oh, it does, and that's the thing. That was just a little concerned about it. Like, obviously, I want it. Like, it's super fucking sick. Like, the art is great, but like, I was just concerned about how we can implement it in a way where it's not gonna devalue or dilute. Because let's be honest, like, the Concordians got where they're at or are where they're at because of like, come on, kind of like oversupply. Like, even you were mentioning like that there should be some burning, or you would like to see some burning because that's why the Concordians are the way they are, kind of.
No, I mean the Concordians are the way they are because we said that's the way that they are. Like we let people talk us into that.
Yeah, there was no real plan around their implementation. I think that's the key thing. If we have a structured way of deflating the collection and it's well thought through and everyone's on board, then you can market it accordingly. There was no marketing around what was actually happening, so it's pretty obvious what's going to happen.
Yeah, no, as long as at least
And
it's being
probably
considered.
look, it's probably a good little segue into gauging some sentiment and sort of opinions on what everybody thinks around, I guess, some of the top projects and what they're doing. And do we like what they're doing? Do we think that we could mimic some of the things that they're doing, or at least put our little spin on it with the Geckoverse stuff? What are people's thoughts around that? Projects like Tayo, for instance, or other projects that are doing some cool stuff.
It's interesting. Hey, what's up, guys? DJ. It's interesting because most of these collections, they start with their Genesis asset and then go into inflating their collection with lesser value assets, right? Where we already have a massive collection that we're talking about taking the other way. So I don't really have any good examples to point to where they've done that before.
Yeah, correct. And that's the interesting thing, is that we're in a unique position where we can kind of pave our own way, but potentially lean on some of these ideas or mechanisms to get there. We've got some, we've been talking to some pretty influential people in the space that have done this before and have some great ideas, but it ultimately comes down to what we think, or what everyone thinks works best for the collections that we already have. Look, I tend to lean on the towards Sterling's point of view, that some kind of burn mechanism, but that's incorporated into a law or into some kind of existing part of the fifth faction race or whatever, could be really cool. But it just depends on what everybody thinks.
I think it's got to either be burning or long-term staking. It needs to be either burning or some long-term staking mechanism. I mean, maybe we do grow into that size eventually.
And particularly if there's going to be no
utility
utility as well. I mean, the space is hungry for utility. I think
I don't really see anything.
We do need to consider what the market wants, and not just us, all of us within the collection, but people that new participants that we really need to onboard.
Yeah, so that's one of the things where, before we get into a fifth faction, something that we talked about, voting mechanisms. Do we actually want a fifth faction to begin with? Would be something that I would be interested in hearing, like from a community perspective. I'd want to poll that in comparison to probably one or two other ideas in directions, because before we basically go down the exact same path as the previous team, I would want to have one or two other ideas that would be competitor like ideas of directions. And then if we go down the fifth faction, we mentioned staking or we mentioned burning as the mechanisms. I again want to poll the community to figure out which way we would want to go from there, and that's how we can get everybody involved. So that's kind of how I see community involvement.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense to me, and I think at least anecdotally,
I totally agree with that.
What you're going to find is that people overwhelmingly want something like that, but they don't want.
I mean, I think we were going to be at like over 20,000 with those ships or something like that, and
it's crazy.
I mean, that's just like out of control. And just another collection for reference, Wabbits. I'm not promoting them by any way, not financial advice. Their Saigo Rabbit, which is their third generation, is the one where you needed to buy 3 of each of their first and second generation to burn them to create the third generation. So it was just a way to make it like deflationary, so that we could look at like that as kind of like a inspiration to figure out like a way to use our existing utility, like crystals, like concordians, like our existing geckos, to try to create a formula for how you would, create this fifth faction. So there's plenty to work with, but yeah, I would definitely not increase the supply.
I think we need to have something to look, to get excited about and look forward to. So, the fifth faction lore is just so central. Me personally, I can't see the majority of people wanting to go in a different direction than that. But just as long as it's done in a way where there's some kind of sacrifice that makes that valuable, these things will be valuable if you have to give something up for it. If it just gets airdropped for people for free, then it's just going to have zero value. But if you got to, chuck a crystal and a gecko, or however we end up doing that, I think right there, outside of having cool new art, is just going to increase that's value.
And maybe we don't call it fifth faction, because that's obviously has some PTSD for some people. But yeah, I think the idea of a really cool, not a side collection, but almost like a without saying this is what it would be called. Sorry, is that like a legendary collection or something that you actually merge some things together to create that, and it doesn't necessarily increase the supply. It cuts it down to whether it is the 10,000 or slightly less. But yeah, it doesn't necessarily have to be called the fifth faction if that kind of triggers some people.
Well, yeah, I mean, that was my point. Like, I don't know. I can't speak for, anyone but myself, but there could be a huge group of people out there that maybe want to maybe have it as a serum or something, so that it's not fifth faction, but it's, again, that also depends on the lore. But they're going on a slightly different adventure, and you get the same end result, which is you're creating value in your NFT and you're decreasing the supply, but it's just not being the fifth faction adventure. So, right now I know that you can't, for a lot of people, you can't really envision it because we're not exactly giving people the options right now. We're not talking about it, but if we were to give the options, I would expect we would have a minimum of 2, if not 3, and people can make these votes. It could still be a fifth faction. I'm just,
Sure. Nothing wrong with options.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Just important
Yeah.
clarification there. We're geckos. We don't
We
drink
huff
serum. We
spaceship
snort
gas
crystals.
is what we do. Yeah.
All right, that's the new tagline.
I just want that perfect
That's the
crystal
mission
here.
statement right there.
And no suggestions are bad suggestions. I think the beauty of having so many people interested and engaged is to get all these suggestions and ideas out, and obviously Gossip throwing out these really cool drawings and kind of interesting new geckos sort of sparks that little bit of energy and excitement. And I think it's if you've got something you're thinking of and you don't necessarily bring it up today, by all means chuck it in suggestions or chuck it in the general chat, because it's all gonna come together through everybody's input.
I'm sorry, this is neat. I'm very new to your guys' entire galaxy, but I'm trying to as I'm hearing deflationary, was the I want to say is the Concordian, was that Helper by any chance? It looks like it's so undervalued, and it was supposed to be part of the fifth faction. Would maybe merging those two to make the fifth faction make that equally important and deflationary without devaluing one and giving another value to the other? Maybe that's a thought where you could just merge these two, and then they bit the gecko because this guy was greedy or whatever. They thought it could be a gecko, and then it bit the gecko. Gecko turned to the fifth one. It dies, and now the gecko has the fifth whatever it would be, right? Yeah. giving everybody like the entire ecosystem. And it also means that if you need a helper for the game, you're sacrificing that helper because you want to join the new faction or whatever, so you'd want to buy another one, something of that nature.
Yeah, it's a great suggestion. I think that's the beauty of having of these little things. I mean, originally we were kind of led down the garden path as to what these Concordians were doing. They were supposed to be this, secret thing behind the garage doors, and they turned out to be pretty much nothing and useless. So, yeah, I mean, we joke with ANSI a lot, but there's potential there to have them contribute in a big way.
Well, so originally the Concordians actually, it was supposed to be in the lore a fake out. So the Concordians were actually always planned as no utility. It was supposed to be the initial prize for holding,
the four factions.
plus
having the Enigma crystal, really.
Yeah.
It almost felt like they pivoted from that, though, because originally it kind of felt like as we were collecting these factions and getting the crystal and all the rest, and we were opening the door, it almost felt like it was building up to be this big part of the puzzle. And then, like a lot of things that they were kind of suggested, it pivoted and became something else. So I think, everyone sort of holds different value or whatever to the individual items in the collections, but how we bring them all together is going to be pretty cool, I think.
It's because they were looking at Bored Ape Yacht Club, and at the time, that obviously that collection's been around a lot longer and has more, monetary value, and they had just released their companions, which also has no utility, but at the same time, it's like apples to oranges comparison, because everyone, so what they did
they were originally supposed to just be a pet or a companion with no utility, and then they just wrote it into the story that they were mind control robots and stuff, but to give it some validity of why the heck they're even there, but it wasn't really ever supposed to be much beyond that other than just talked about.
We did a Google Doc, like this was like a day before the big blow up, that people in the garage could contribute and towards like what they would want to see happen next, or / like how they would want to see the fifth faction created. So we have a lot of and I can repost it in the chat if people would like, but we got a lot of really great ideas in terms of like what combination of stuff would need to be burned from community members, to create like a fifth faction, not just people like in the strategy team or anything like that. So there's definitely a lot of ideas overall, new members, old members.
Would you guys say that expanding the overall collection is definitely not the intention whatsoever?
100%.
Yeah, we can. I think we can all be on the same page when we talk. When we discuss these things, that we're not necessarily going to add anything on top of everything we've got. What we're discussing in terms of a potential end result in whether you want to call it a fifth faction or not, is potential other burns that or in I guess burns that would happen to achieve that. It's not, we're not adding. I don't think we do. I don't think we can. Like Pace alluded to, that maybe later on, if we start blowing up and we're getting a lot more participants, in the Gecko verse, but I don't think now you can do that. Yeah. Oh yeah.
1,000 soul.
Yeah, maybe if we're at like 500.
Sorry,
or
what was that one?
Floor, something like that.
In addition to burns, I think we can also modify existing entities.
Yeah.
In addition
so
to
whether
burning as a
one
mechanism,
like
I think we can
transforms
also change
or becomes a double-sided gecko
entities.
with the
I think
original
they're
gecko on
still
the front
marked
and
as
the
mutable.
fifth faction gecko on the back, or how, and you can flip it to where you can choose which one That was proposed by a community member before, and Chunk tried to put that into his roadmap or whatever when he tried to take control. I don't hate that idea. I think it's actually pretty cool. But that would be like a lateral move of, we're not going down in our 10,000 or anything like that. And that would be worst case scenario. Like the best case scenario, I think, is we decrease the amount of NFTs that we have in the ecosystem. But at worst case, we're just staying where we're at and adding a lot of cool new value and new things to get excited about. Goodbye, Craig.
I'm gonna go ahead and kick out the Craig bot. So if anybody wants to say goodbye to Craig, say it now.